Part 1. The first night at Hollowpine Cemetery. The first time I walked through Hollowpine Cemetery at midnight, the wind felt like it carried whispers from a world beneath my feet. I could hear the branches scraping against one another above, my head dry and brittle in the cold air. The moon sat low, pale and distant, spilling a silver wash over the cracked headstones that leaned in crooked rows. The place smelled faintly of damp soil and rust. My name is Samuel Reed. People in town do not look me in the eyes when I walk past them. Maybe it is because they know what I do for a living. Maybe it is because they think working in a place like this stains a man in ways that soap cannot wash away. I am a grave digger, but not the kind who works during the day when the sun burns shadows away. My work begins when the town sleeps. I had taken the job out of desperation. My father was dying in a small apartment in Detroit, and the hospital bills were draining every dollar I had left. The ad I found in the back of a local paper was short and strange. It asked for someone willing to dig and prepare burial sites during the hours between midnight and dawn. The pay was nearly double what most day workers made. The location listed was Hollowpine, a cemetery just outside of Traverse City. The caretaker, a tall, gaunt man named Victor Hale, met me at the rusted front gate on my first night. His voice was slow and measured, and his eyes were the color of cloudy ice. He handed me a lantern and a set of keys, without a single question about my experience. "You work alone," he said, "and you do not leave before sunrise." He gave me a plot number for the first grave. It was deep inside the far section of the cemetery, a place where the oldest stones stood, some worn so smooth by rain and years that the names had vanished entirely. The air there felt colder. My breath came out in thick white clouds as I pushed my shovel into the earth. The soil was heavy and wet. Every strike of the metal blade sank with a dull thud. After an hour, my shoulders ached and my hands burned from the cold. That was when I heard the first sound that did not belong. It was faint at first, like the scrape of something dragging across stone. I froze, shovel in hand, listening. The wind had died completely. The cemetery was silent, except for that sound, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere behind me. I turned, raising the lantern. Its light stretched across the graves in uneven patches, catching glimpses of marble and shadow. Nothing moved. The sound had stopped. I told myself it was an animal, maybe a raccoon or a stray dog, but the thought did not sit well. It had been too slow, too steady. I kept digging. Minutes passed. My body was bent forward when it came again, louder now. Drag, scrape, drag, scrape. It was coming from beyond the row of tall obelisks to my left. I called out, my voice sounding far too loud. In the stillness, no one answered. I took a step toward the obelisks. The lantern flame wavered, as if the air itself had shifted. I could smell something then, faint but sharp. Not rot, not exactly. It was metallic, like old blood on iron. When I stepped past the last obelisk, the lantern light fell on an open grave. It was not the one I was digging. The earth around it was fresh, darker than the soil beneath my feet, and at the bottom, half hidden by shadow, something pale shifted. I stumbled back, my breath catching. The thing moved again, a slow twisting motion, as if something beneath the dirt was trying to rise. That was when I heard the whisper. It was right beside my ear, low and ragged, speaking my name. Part 2. The thing in the earth eye spun around so fast, the lantern nearly slipped from my hand. No one was there. Only rows of tilted stones and the black gaps between them. My pulse thundered in my ears. The whisper had been close enough for the warmth of breath to brush my skin. I swallowed hard and forced myself to look back at the open grave. The pale shape inside had gone still. I could see just enough to know it was not an animal. The outline was wrong. Too thin, too long. I told myself to walk away, to get back to the plot Victor had assigned me, but my legs did not listen. I stepped closer. the lantern's glow spilling over the grave's edge. The thing was lying on its side, curled like a sleeping child, but its skin was the color of bone, stretched tight over sharp joints. Its head turned toward me, slow and deliberate, and that was when I saw its eyes. They were not human eyes. They were flat, dark pits that caught no light at all. I staggered back, the toe of my boot catching on the frozen grass. My foot came down hard on the edge of a stone marker, and the lantern jolted. The glass rattled, but did not break. The thing began to crawl upward, its limbs bending at angles that made my stomach twist. Its fingers dug into the dirt like hooks. The metallic smell grew stronger, filling my throat. Then, without sound, it stopped. It froze halfway out of the grave, head tilted. Something in the air had changed again, subtle but heavy. From somewhere deep in the cemetery came the sound of keys jangling. A slow, steady rhythm, followed by the creak of boots on frozen soil. Victor Hale appeared between the rows, his tall frame cutting a dark silhouette against the faint moonlight. He did not look at me. His eyes were locked on the open grave. In his hand was a narrow iron rod with symbols scratched into it. He raised it, and the thing in the grave recoiled as if burned. "Get back to your work, Samuel." His voice was sharp, stripped of the calm he had when we first met. I wanted to ask what that thing was, why it was here, but my throat refused to form the words. "Do not touch what does not belong to you," he said, and then he stepped forward. The iron rod pressed against the thing's chest, and a hiss like steam filled the air. The thing slipped back into the grave, and the soil above it began to shift as if an invisible hand were shoveling it closed. Victor did not watch me as he turned away. He walked into the darkness, his lantern light fading until only mine remained. I forced myself back to my assigned plot, but every shadow seemed to lean closer now. Every gust of wind felt like a breath against my ear. That night I did not finish the grave. I worked until the first streak of dawn broke the horizon, then left without saying a word to Victor. But I knew one thing for certain. Whatever was buried in Hollow Pine did not always stay buried. Part 3, the second night. The next evening I told myself I would not go back. I told myself the job was not worth the money, not worth the cold, the dark, or the thing I saw clawing its way out of the earth. But I did go back. It was not just the money. There was something else now, a pull I could not name. All day I thought about that pale shape in the grave, about the way it moved, the way it looked at me without eyes. When I arrived, Victor was not at the gate. The chain was looped, but the lock hung open. My breath turned white as I stepped inside. The air was still, thick, as though the cemetery had been holding itself in all day just to breathe when I entered. My plot assignment was written on a scrap of paper in my coat pocket. Section 7, far corner, near the old fence where the wood had rotted to splinters. The moon was brighter than the night before, laying cold light over the stones. Every few steps I caught movement at the edges of my sight, but when I turned, nothing was there. I told myself it was branches shifting in the wind, though there was no wind. When I reached Section 7, I set the lantern down and began to dig. The shovel bit into the ground with a dull crunch. The earth was colder here, clumped and heavy. Each strike seemed to take more effort than the last. Half an hour passed. I was waist deep when I heard it again. Drag, scrape, drag, scrape. I froze, my hands tightening on the shovel handle. The sound was behind me, closer than before. I forced myself to turn slowly. Nothing but graves and shadows. Then the sound came again, but this time it was not behind me. It was beneath me. The soil at my boots shifted. A faint vibration traveled up through the handle of my shovel. I stepped back, and the earth where I had been standing began to rise in a slow, uneven mound. Something pale pushed through. Fingers, long and thin, breaking the surface. They curled against the open air, as if tasting it. I scrambled out of the hole, boots slipping in the loose dirt. The thing pulled itself upward, and I saw its head tilt back, skin tight over bone, mouth open far too wide. There was no sound, but I could feel something in my chest, like the air was being pulled out of me. My lantern flickered. A whisper slid through the dark. Not my name this time. Words I did not understand, thick and wet, curling through the air like smoke. The thing climbed higher, its limbs moving in stiff, wrong angles. My breath came in ragged bursts. Then, from somewhere deeper in the cemetery, another whisper answered, and another, and another. I spun toward the rows of graves. Pale shapes were pushing up through the soil in every direction. Their movements were slow but steady, like they had all heard the same call. I grabbed my lantern and ran. The light swung wildly, shadows breaking and twisting around me. My boots caught on roots and stones, but I did not stop. The whispers followed, rising into a low, humming chorus. The gate was ahead. I could see the faint silver chain swaying in the moonlight, but as I reached it, the lock was no longer open, and behind me, the earth was still moving. Part 4. The locked gate tie slammed my hands against the gate, the cold metal rattling under my palms. The lock was solid now, the chain drawn tight. I yanked it until my fingers ached, but it would not give. Behind me the whispers grew louder. They were not just voices now. They were layered sounds, soft groans, low clicks, and something that reminded me of insects moving under wood. I turned, pressing my back to the bars. The pale figures were climbing from the graves in slow, deliberate motions, not clawing or scrambling but rising as if pulled by invisible strings. Their faces were stretched thin, eyes nothing but black hollows. The nearest one stopped a few paces away. Its head twitched once, twice, before it lifted its face toward me. The skin along its jaw split open like wet paper. I ran. The lantern swung in my grip, casting wild flashes across the stones. I had no plan except to put as much distance as I could between myself and the things that were crawling free of the earth. I reached the caretaker's shed, a squat wooden building leaning against the north wall of the cemetery. Its door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of oil and damp wood. Tools hung from rusted nails along the walls, their shadows bending in the lantern light. I pushed the door closed and dropped the iron latch. My breath came fast and shallow. I tried to steady it, to think. The shed was dark except for the small circle of light at my feet. I could hear the faint scratching of branches outside, but the voices had gone quiet. I told myself they had lost me, that I would wait here until sunrise. Then something moved in the far corner. It was just outside, the edge of the lantern's glow, a slow shifting sound, like cloth dragging over wood. My hand tightened around the shovel I had carried with me. I stepped closer, raising the lantern. The light spilled into the corner and touched pale skin. A figure crouched there, knees drawn to its chest. Its head rested against the wall, face turned away. For a moment I thought it might be human, maybe someone else trapped in here. Then, it turned its head. Its mouth was sewn shut. Black thread ran through torn lips in uneven stitches, and its eyes were the same hollow pits I had seen in the graveyard. It rose without sound, unfolding its body until it stood taller than me. The black thread trembled, and then one of the stitches snapped. A thin, wet hiss slipped out from between its teeth. From outside, the whispers began again, louder this time, as if answering the sound. The thing took one step toward me. The lantern flame shuddered. I did not wait for the next step. I slammed the lantern forward into its chest. Glass shattered, flame spilling over its skin. It made no sound as it fell back, the fire catching in its thin hair. I kicked the shed door open and ran into the night. The cemetery was alive with movement now. Pale shapes swayed between the stones. The whispers had become a low chant, all voices speaking the same pattern over and over. Words that pulled at the inside of my skull, and through all of it, somewhere deep in the dark, I heard something bigger. Not a voice, a heartbeat, slow, heavy, coming from below the ground. Part 5. The heart beneath a heartbeat shook the air in slow, heavy waves. Each thud seemed to press against my ribs from the inside, like something was trying to make my chest match its rhythm. I ran without direction, weaving between headstones, ducking beneath twisted branches. The lantern was gone, and the world had collapsed into strips of moonlight and black shadow. The chant was everywhere now. Deep voices, high voices, all speaking the same jagged pattern of sounds. It pressed into my skull until my teeth hurt. I turned a corner between two tall obelisks and froze. The ground ahead was split open. Not a grave, a raw, jagged tear in the earth at least 20 feet across. From it rose a pale mist, coiling upward into the cold night air. The heartbeat was louder here, pulsing from somewhere deep in that crack. Shapes moved in the mist. Tall, thin silhouettes, their arms too long, their heads tilting at strange angles. They were gathered around the tier like worshippers, swaying. In time with the heartbeat, one of them turned toward me. The mist curled around its shoulders, hiding parts of its face. But I could see the skin stretched, cracked, carved with deep lines that formed symbols I did not understand. It stepped forward, and the others followed. The mist came with them, rolling across the ground like water. My lungs burned as it reached me. The air smelled of cold metal and something older, like wet stone pulled from deep underground. I tried to run, but my feet sank into the soil. The earth was soft here, sucking at my boots as if it wanted to pull me under. From the tear in the ground came another sound. Not the heartbeat, a voice. It was deeper than anything I had ever heard, so low it felt like it was speaking through my bones instead of my ears. The words meant nothing, but I understood their intent. It was calling me. The pale figures reached me. Cold hands closed around my arms, my shoulders, my throat. Their touch was not rough, but it drained something out of me. Heat, strength, thought. They began to pull me toward the crack in the earth. My boots dragged through the soil. The heartbeat quickened, shaking the ground. I fought against them, twisting, kicking. My fingers caught the edge of a stone marker, and I clung to it with everything I had. One of the figures leaned close, its face inches from mine. In its black eyes I saw something move, not reflection, not light. Something alive, writhing just beneath the surface. A shadow fell over us. The pale hands released me. The figures backed away into the mist. Victor Hale stood on the far side of the crack, the iron rod in his hand glowing faintly red. His face was tight, the skin drawn back over his cheekbones. "You should not be here, Samuel." The ground shook. The voice from the crack swelled, a deep roar that made my vision blur. Victor swung the iron rod down into the earth, striking the edge of the tear. Light burst outward in a sharp red arc. The mist recoiled, the figures retreating into the darkness. When I could see again, the crack in the ground was smaller, though the heartbeat still thudded far below. Victor looked at me for a long moment. His voice was quieter when he spoke. "If you come back tomorrow, you will not leave again." He turned and walked into the dark, leaving me on my knees in the cold soil. The sound of the heartbeat still echoing in my bones. Part 6. The Pali told myself I would not return. Victor's warning had been clear enough, but the sound followed me home. It was faint at first. A low pulse I thought was my own heartbeat, a trick of nerves. But as night fell, it grew louder. Every thud came from beneath the floorboards, not my chest. I did not sleep. I sat in my chair until the dark outside the window was turning gray. That was when the dream began. I was standing at the edge of the crack in the earth. The mist rose around me, curling over my arms and face. The voice from below spoke again, slower this time, the words stretching like threads being pulled tight. Each one sank into me, filling my lungs, my veins, my head. When I woke, my hands were covered in dirt. The cuffs of my coat were damp with soil, and my boots, I do not remember putting them on, were caked with the same dark earth as hollow pine. That night I went back, not because I wanted to, because I had to. The gate was unlocked again. The cemetery was quieter than I remembered. No wind, no sound of animals. The stones leaned in the pale moonlight like silent witnesses. I did not see Victor. My feet carried me too. Section 7, without my mind guiding them. The ground there was uneven now, fresh mounds of dirt scattered between older graves. Some had been dug up, the coffins gone. As I passed, the earth in one of the open graves shifted. Something pale rose just enough to watch me. I did not stop. The heartbeat was stronger. It seemed to vibrate through the soil, a rhythm my body wanted to follow. By the time I reached the place where the crack had been, my steps matched it perfectly. The ground was still closed, but the mist seeped up through thin slits in the soil. I could feel heat on my face, faint, but wrong for the winter air. I crouched and pressed my hand to the ground. It was warm. The warmth spread up my arm and into my chest. My head grew heavy. The world dimmed. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer in the cemetery. I stood in a tunnel of black stone, its walls slick and wet. The air was thick with the smell of metal and rot. Something moved in the darkness ahead, too large to be human, its shape shifting with every step. The voice came again, but now it was inside my skull. I understood the meaning this time. It told me my name, not Samuel Reed, the other name, the one I did not know I had until now. It told me I belonged here. I tried to step back, but the floor was soft, sucking at my boots. The thing in the dark moved closer. I could not see its face, but I saw its hands, long white, with too many joints. It reached for me. I fell backward, and the world snapped. I was in the cemetery again, lying on the cold ground, my breath fogging in the air. My hand was still pressed to the earth. It was no longer warm, but the heartbeat had not stopped. It was inside me now. Part 7. The things that follow for the first time in weeks. I tried to stay away from Holopine. It did not matter. The heartbeat was constant now. I heard it when I closed my eyes, felt it in my hands when I tried to eat, in my jaw when I tried to speak. My apartment walls seemed to pulse in time with it, the paint shifting in tiny, steady beats. I started noticing the others. It began on the bus to the city. The man sitting across from me was dressed in a dark wool coat, his head bent, hands clasped. At first, nothing seemed strange. Then the bus rolled through a patch of sunlight, and I saw his skin pale, tight, thin enough that the veins beneath showed like a faint black web. I could not look away. Slowly, he lifted his head. His eyes were black pits, the same hollow voids I had seen in the cemetery. His mouth moved, forming words I could not hear over the engine's rumble, but I knew the rhythm. The chant dot at the next stop. He stood and stepped off the bus without turning back. My hands were shaking. That night, I saw another, a woman in the stairwell of my building, standing in the shadow between two flickering lights. She smiled at me, her teeth small and sharp, her lips cracked like old leather. She whispered something and my legs went weak. I ran past her without speaking. By the third day, they were everywhere in the corner of the grocery store, standing at the end of empty streets, watching from behind half-closed curtains, all of them pale, all of them whispering. On the fourth night, I woke to the sound of dirt spilling onto my floor. In the dark, I saw the shape crouched beside my bed, its hands sifting through a pile of soil that had not been there before. It looked up at me with black eyes and tilted its head, listening to the heartbeat inside me. I could not move. When the sun rose, it was gone. The dirt remained. I stopped leaving the apartment. The walls felt closer each day, as if the room itself was leaning toward me. The heartbeat filled every inch of space. Then I heard Victor's voice. It came from the other side of my locked door, calm, measured, the way it had been when we first met. "Samuel, you have to come back." I pressed my ear to the wood. The voice was closer now, just on the other side. You let it in. The heartbeat quickened, rattling my ribs. I could smell the earth again, cold and wet. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the pale figures were waiting at the end, their hands outstretched, and the pull toward Hollow Pine was stronger than it had ever been. Part 8. The return. I did not remember leaving my apartment. One moment I was sitting in the dark, my hands buried in the pile of soil on my floor. The next, I was standing at the gate of Hollow Pine. The chain hung open. The wind was still. I stepped inside. The cemetery was different now. The rows of graves no longer seemed fixed. The stones leaned in new directions, some sinking halfway into the earth, others standing taller than they should. Paths I knew had shifted. The place felt alive, shifting just enough to guide me forward. I passed Section 7 without slowing. My feet carried me deeper, toward the farthest corner of Hollow Pine, a part I had never worked in. The stones here were older, their names carved in letters so thin they looked like scratches. The heartbeat was thunder now, shaking the ground beneath me. The air was thick, almost solid, pressing against my skin. The trees ended suddenly, and I stood before the crack in the earth. It had opened again, wider than before. Mist poured out in great, slow curls. Victor Hale was waiting there. His face was drawn tight, his eyes hollowed by shadows. In his hand he held the iron rod, but it no longer glowed. The metal was dark, pitted, almost brittle. "You came back," he said. His voice was not a question. I told him I could not stay away. The words felt strange in my mouth, as though they had been placed there by something else. He stepped closer, studying my face. "There is no leaving now, Samuel. You are part of it." The mist shifted between us. Figures moved within it, their shapes bending and stretching. Their whispers were softer now, almost gentle. I asked him what it was. The thing below. Victor's jaw tightened. "It is older than the ground it sleeps in, older than the first stone laid here. The dead do not belong to it. They are only the surface." The heartbeat slowed, deep and deliberate, like it was listening. Victor raised the rod as if to strike the earth, but the mist surged upward, wrapping around his arm. The rod fell from his hand, vanishing into the white. His eyes went wide, and then he was gone, pulled into the crack without a sound. I stood alone at the edge. The mist curled around my feet, warm now, carrying the smell of earth and iron. The voice from below spoke again, but this time it was not calling, it was welcoming me home. Part 9. Below, the mist climbed my legs, rising past my knees, my waist. It did not choke me. It held me, steady and warm. As the ground beneath my feet softened and gave way, I sank without falling. The light of the cemetery above faded into a pale blur, then vanished entirely. The mist thinned, revealing walls of black stone slick with moisture. I was standing in a tunnel, the air thick and heavy, with the smell of wet earth and rusted metal. The heartbeat was all around me now, thudding through the walls, the floor, the air itself. Every step I took matched its rhythm without thought. Shapes moved in the shadows ahead. They were not the pale figures from the surface. These were taller, their bodies stretched thin and wrapped in strips of what looked like rotting cloth. Their faces were hidden, but when they turned their heads, I could see their mouths, wide, toothless openings that pulsed gently, like they were breathing with me. None of them touched me. They only stepped aside, bowing their heads as I passed. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The ceiling was lost in darkness. The walls curved inward, slick and veined with lines of red light that pulsed with each heartbeat. In the center was the thing. It was not a body, not in any shape I recognized. It was a mass of bone and stone, and something that shifted slowly beneath its surface, like muscle under skin. From it, hundreds of black tendrils spread outward, disappearing into the walls and floor. The voice came again, not from above, not from below, but from inside me. "You were made for this. The chamber's floor trembled. The tendrils moved, curling toward me. Each one tipped with something like a hand, but with too many fingers. I tried to step back, but the ground held me in place. The tendrils touched my boots, my legs, my chest. Heat spread through me, and I realized the heartbeat was no longer coming from the walls. It was mine. Images flooded my mind, graves opening in moonlight, pale figures spilling into the streets of a sleeping city, soil rising like waves to swallow entire houses. And in every vision, I was there, not watching, leading. The tendrils lifted me from the ground. The voice filled every corner of my head. It is time. The chamber tilted, the red light brightened, and something massive shifted in the dark beyond the walls. The ground above would not hold much longer. Part 10. The rising. The tendrils tightened around me, their grip steady but unhurried, like a predator that knows there is no escape. The heat in my chest spread to my arms, my head, until every beat of the heart inside me sent a deep vibration through my bones. The thing's voice filled me, each word sinking like a weight into my thoughts. The ground is ready. The city sleeps. You will open the way. The walls of the chamber shook. Cracks split the stone, and through them I saw flashes of the surface. Not just hollow pine, but streets, houses, the glow of street lamps under a night sky. Each crack pulsed with red light, the same rhythm as the heartbeat. The figures from the tunnel stepped into the chamber, circling the mass of bone and stone. Their cloth-wrapped heads turned toward me, mouths opening in unison. The chant began, low and slow, rising with every beat. Above us, the soil gave way. I saw the cemetery from below, graves collapsing inward, headstones tumbling into the widening hole. Pale bodies climbed upward, their black eyes glinting in the thin moonlight. The tendrils lowered me until my boots touched the stone again. The heat inside me flared, and the ground around my feet cracked open. The mist surged upward through it, thick and fast, spilling toward the surface. The voice spoke again, soft now, lead them. I saw myself stepping through the broken gates of hollow pine, hundreds of pale figures following. I saw doors splintering, windows shattering, the chant echoing through the streets. Every person who heard it fell to their knees, their eyes darkening, and in every vision, I felt no fear, only purpose. But something else moved in the dark above. A flicker of dim red light, the sound of boots on stone. Victor Hale stepped into the chamber. His face was pale and drawn, but in his hands he held the iron rod, glowing brighter than I had ever seen it. Samuel, you have to fight it. His voice was hoarse but firm. It is using you to break the seal. The tendrils shifted toward him, but he drove the rod into the floor. Light burst outward, cutting through the mist. The chant faltered, the heartbeat stuttered. The thing's voice roared in my skull. Not in words this time, but in raw, crushing rage. The tendrils around me loosened. For the first time, I could move. My hand closed around the iron rod's handle, hot and heavy in my grip. The heartbeat pounded, faster now, desperate. I could feel it waiting for my choice. Above, the cracks in the ground had widened to the size of houses. The dead swayed at the edge, waiting for my command. I looked at Victor. His face told me what I already knew. If I struck the thing with the rod, the chamber would collapse, sealing it and everything inside forever, including me. The tendrils curled at my feet, gentle now. The voice returned, almost tender. Or I could step forward, take my place, and let the world above become hollow. Pine. My grip tightened on the rod. The heartbeat matched my own, and I chose